Her face hit the dirt before she even realized she'd fallen, blood mixed with dust stinging her lips. The world around her spun in a haze of heat and grit. The stagecoach wheels still turned behind her, kicking sand into her hair. Of course, someone yelled for the horses to stop, but no one came to help her up. Clara Monroe lay there, her knee bleeding through torn fabric, the sun burning her pale skin. Horse 2000M for a husband she had never met. And this was how her new life began, on the ground in pain, alone. The heat shimmered on the road, twisting the air like glass. Horser tall, still, heavy with presence. She looked up and saw him, Graham Holt, the man she had married by letter 3 weeks ago. 47, rugged face, faded shirt sticking to his skin with sweat. Worse, his eyes were steady and unreadable, like he had seen too many summers in Dust Valley, and learned to stop flinching at suffering. He didn't speak right away, just crouched beside her. His voice, when it came, was low and rough. "You hurt that, miss." Orson's got worse. She tried to sit up, wincing. "I'm fine." Her throat was dry, her pride even drier. He reached a hand toward her, and she hesitated. Her small fingers trembled before she placed them in his. The difference was startling. Or his palm was rough, strong, but gentle. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, whereas when she stood, she realized how close they were. Her head barely reached his shoulder, her heart hammered, and before she could stop herself, she whispered the thought that escaped her lips. The corner of his mouth twitched. He looked down at her, that slow half smile pulling at his jaw. "We'll make it fit, ma'am." We'll make it fit, ma'am." For a moment, everything was silent again. The dust, the heat, the distant wind, it all froze. He led her to the wagon waiting nearby. The horses snorted. A few townsfolk stared as they passed, whispering behind gloved hands. Clara's cheeks burned, not from the sun, but from shame. One man tipped his hat, but didn't smile. "You're riding with Hall, huh?" he muttered. Words just loud enough for her to hear. "Careful, ma'am. Dust don't settle easy around him." She didn't understand what he meant. Not then. She didn't know what kind of man Graham Holt was. A protector, a loner, or become her husband. As the wagon rolled toward the horizon, she looked at him again. The sweat glistened on his neck. His hand rested loose on the rise. He looked like a man who had built his life from rock and loss. Clara swallowed hard. The dry air cut her throat. She wasn't sure if she had just escaped danger back east or ridden straight into a new one. When a man waits for a wife in the middle of nowhere. And what does he really want from her? The wagon rolled slow through the heat. Claire sat stiff beside Graham, her skirt torn, her leg throbbing under the bandage of dust and blood. Every bump on the road sent pain shooting up her thigh. She tried not to show it, he noticed anyway. "You'll open that cut again." His voice was deep but calm. She looked away. I said, "I'm fine." He didn't answer. Words just flicked the reins. His jaw set tight. The road stretched endless ahead, golden fields on both sides. Grass bent low under the sun. By the time they reached the ranch, the light burned against her skin, and the air wavered like glass. Quiet, too quiet. A windmill creaked slow in the distance. A small herd of horses moved lazily near the fence. Graham stopped the wagon and stepped down. Before she could protest, he lifted her, careful and firm, and set her on a wooden bench near the porch. The touch was gentle, but her heart still jumped. "You're bleeding again." He crouched down. "You're bleeding again." He crouched down, rolled up her skirt just enough to see the scrape. His hands were rough, his fingers tanned and scarred from years of ranch work. When he touched her skin, they moved like he was handling glass. He poured water from a tin cup, washed away the dirt, and tied a clean strip of cloth around her leg. Clara winced, biting her lip. He looked up. "Sorry." "It's fine," she whispered, then added quieter, "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he said simply. "You're my wife now. Can't have you limping around the yard. Can't have you limping around the yard." Worse, hit her harder than she expected. She wasn't used to being cared for. Not like this. Not with patience. Not with hands that could crush, but chose not to. That evening, she saw him sitting alone on the porch, the light fading behind him. A pipe rested cold between his fingers. Forgotten. "You ever get lonely out here?" she asked from the doorway. He didn't turn right away. "Lonely is different from alone," he said. "I came here after I lost my brother. Dust Valley's quiet. Lets a man remember without losing his mind." Ware stayed quiet. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy, but shared after a while. He stood and nodded toward the ranch house. "You hungry a little?" Then let's get you fed. Crossing cart, walking ahead. She watched him move slow and steady like a man who had carried too much weight in silence. Something about that steadiness calmed her. Something about his quiet made her curious. Of course, things got worse. Everything was big. The chairs, the table, the walls. Yet there was one small room tucked in the corner, freshly built. The bed looked new, the curtains white, the desk small enough for her to reach. Of course. You made this. He nodded once. Didn't know your size, so I guess small. She smiled for the first time since she left Boston. The glare outside pressed against the windows, but in that little room, she felt a warmth that had nothing. Worse, a short ride. Later that afternoon, Clara tried to cook something for them both. She burned the biscuits, undercooked the beans, and filled the kitchen with smoke. Graham walked in, coughed once, and opened the window without a word. You can laugh, she said, flustered. He finally did, low and warm. Worse. I was just thinking, he said. Maybe we'll survive on coffee till you learn the rest. For the first time, her laughter joined his. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like home trying to happen, or if things got worse. But she turned to thank him, but he was already gone. Back out to the yard, boots crunching on gravel. Of course, she watched him from the window, his figure cutting across the light, quiet and strong. And for the first time, Clara wondered, what kind of man builds a world this careful but lives in it all alone? A few days passed under the heavy summer sun. The cut on Clara's leg had started to heal, though it still itched when she walked. Life on the ranch moved slow, the days blending together like heat waves on the horizon. Graham worked from dawn till dark, quiet as ever, and the silence began to weigh on her. By noon, she decided to ride into town just for sugar. She told herself, maybe a bit of cloth, anything to feel like a person again. The general store was half empty. A few men leaned near the counter, hats low, talking too loud. One of them bore a tanner turn when she entered. His grin was crooked, his eyes glassy with whiskey. Well now, he drawled. That must be Mrs. Holt. Heard Graham sent east for a wife. Clara forced a polite smile. Just here for sugar. He stepped closer. Too close. You sure he's treating you right? A man like him's got a temper. She tried to move past, but his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. The contact froze her. Every scar from her past screamed to life. Let me go, she said, voice shaking. He laughed. Relax, sweetheart. Just talking. The door banged open. Graham stood there, shadows spilling across the floor, his eyes locked on Roy's hand around her arm. The room went silent. Let her go, Roy. Roy smirked, but didn't move. Didn't mean no harm. Appalled, I said, let her go. When Roy finally dropped his hand, it was already too late. Graham stepped forward, his voice low and steady. You ever touch her again, I'll bury you right where you stand. No one doubted he meant it. Wise grin cracked. He backed away, muttering curses. Graham didn't look at him again. He just took Clara's hand, gentle now, and led her outside. Glare of noon cut across the street, sharp and blinding. He didn't speak until they reached the wagon. You all right? Clara nodded, though her heart was still racing. I am now. Horse got at us slow, hands gripping the reins tight. Folks like him talk big. Don't you listen to a word they say. The ride back was silent, but not cold. It felt like something had shifted between them. He had protected her without a second thought. Horse abs, and for the first time she felt safe enough to breathe easy. As they passed the ridge, the ranch came into view again, warm and quiet under the wide summer sky. Clara looked at Graham and wondered, why did a man who could fight like that choose to live so far from everyone? And why did the thought of leaving him suddenly feel impossible? If you're still here, maybe pour yourself a cup of tea. Tell me what time it is, where you are, and where you're listening from. And if you want to know what happens next between Claire and Graham, you might want to subscribe before the story rides on. Former, at least on the surface, Roy Tanner kept his distance. But in a small town like Dust Valley, silence never lasted long. Horse always found a way to travel faster than the wind. At first, Claire didn't pay attention. She had chores to do. Horse and Dex. But the bake in her leg was healing well. But one afternoon, while she was at the well drawing water, two women from town rode up. Their bonnets were tied tight, faces shiny with judgment. Horse said with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes, we heard what happened with Roy. Poor thing must have been frightful. The other woman leaned closer. Though some say your husband's temper is worse than Roy's. Folks talk, you know. Clara froze. The bucket rope slipped from her hands, splashing water across her skirt. I don't listen to gossip, she said softly. Maybe you should, the first woman replied, tugging her raz. Some folks say Graham killed a man back in Texas dead. Shot him in the back. You really trust a man like that? They rode off before she could answer, their laughter echoing down the dusty road. Clara stood there, her heart thudding hard. Killed a man. She couldn't believe it, but the words stuck to her like burrs. That evening, Graham came home later than usual. Dust covered his boots, and his face was unreadable. Clara watched him quietly as he sat down, poured water over his hands, and rubbed his temples. "Something wrong in town?" she asked. He didn't look up. Same old talk. Blow over. She hesitated. "Is it true? Did you really?" He took a slow breath, staring out the window before he answered. "I fought for what's mine. Sometimes that means blood, but I'm not the man they're painting." "Of course it is." His head lifted fast, eyes sharp. "No, but I've done things I ain't proud of. Out here, sometimes a man has to fight to stay alive." He pushed his chair back and stood. "Won't defend myself to folks who don't matter." He stepped out to the porch, the screen door creaking behind him. Claire stayed seated, staring at the half-empty cup in front of her. She didn't doubt him, really. But doubt had a strange way of whispering louder than truth. The next morning, when they rode into town for supplies, every eye turned toward them. Men went quiet. Women stopped talking. Mid-word, someone muttered, "Murderer." Graham kept walking, shoulders stiff, eyes forward. Clara's chest burned. She stopped right there on the wooden sidewalk and faced the crowd. "You're wrong about him," she said, voice trembling but clear. "He's the kindest man I've ever known. Worse things dangerous? Maybe you should ask who made him that way." No one spoke. Only the wind answered. Graham looked at her, surprised. Then, for the first time in days, he smiled. It wasn't much, but it was real. Still, as they rode home through the golden light, Clara couldn't shake one thought. If the town was turning against them, what would they do when trouble came knocking again? The sun hung low over Dust Valley, painting the land in gold. The wind had softened, brushing through the grass like an old song. Graham rode ahead, quiet as always, the lines on his face deeper than before. Clara followed close behind, her thoughts heavy, but her heart strangely calm. When they reached the ranch, he helped her down from the horse. Neither spoke at first. Where between them carried everything words couldn't hold. Inside, Graham set his hat on the table and poured 2 cups of water. "You shouldn't have done that in town," he said quietly. "Folks will only talk more now." Clara smiled faintly. "Let them. He stood up for me once. It was my turn." He looked at her for a long time. Something softened in his eyes, like a man finally letting go of a burden he had carried too long. "Worse. You're tougher than you look, Mrs. Hole. And you're kinder than you think, Mr. Hole." They both laughed, small and tired, but honest for a moment. The world outside their little home didn't matter, of course. It's just them, 2 people scarred by life, learning how to heal without running. Later, as the evening cooled, they saw Ortiz outside on that same old wooden table where he had once bandaged her leg. The sky stretched wide and endless above them. The silence felt peaceful now, not empty. Claire broke it first, or saved me. But maybe what saves us is staying long enough to build something. Graham nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Out here, everything takes time. Fences, trust, love, too, I guess." She smiled, resting her hands on the table. "You built this place for yourself. Then you built a piece of it for me. I think that's what love looks like. Making room for someone else to fit." Worse things got worse. Ghosts, we made it fit after all. The light faded slow. Crickets started to sing. And in that quiet corner of the world, 2 hearts finally found home. Sometimes life gives you scars to remind you where you've been. Sometimes it gives you people to remind you where you belong. So tell me, have you ever met someone who made you feel safe enough to stop running? Or are you still waiting for that kind of love? If this story touched something in you, maybe give it a like or a short ride. It helps more people find their way here. And if you want to keep riding with me through the dust and the stories of the Old West, go ahead and subscribe. Pour yourself another cup of tea, lean back, and tell me where you're listening from tonight. Because stories like this aren't just about the past. They're about all of us still trying to make it fit.